Alright guys, Mike here from Meekum Knives, and we are back. And today we're going to put handles on this knife, finally. We're all finished ground, everything looks nice. The grind is nice and even, the flats are nice and clean. And for this build, and for you beginners out there, I highly recommend trying out G10 for handle materials. It works very easily, which means you don't have to fight it. It's not like titanium or anything really tough to work with. It's pretty strong, it's resistant to chemical, and it's cheap. So I have this black and brown piece here, and if the camera will show up, you see I paid $11 for this whole sheet, and this is 0.180 thick. That's just shy of 3/16 of an inch, I believe. But this should be plenty thick for our project. I wouldn't go too much thicker than a 1/4 inch, or you're going to end up with kind of a broomstick of a handle. That's my preference. Some guys like those big blocky handles. I like them nice and slimline. Kind of like this one's really slim. Okay, that's what I'm working on. Okay, so here's how we're going to start. I like to line my handles up with the edge of the material if I can, and we're going to do brown side in. So what I'll do on this straight edge here, I line it up with the sharpening notch, okay, and then I'm going to trace around the knife to give me an idea. Doesn't have to be perfect. Give me an idea of where we are, okay, and that's going to be the inside left side. Flip the knife over, just like that. When you're working with something that's two different colors, make sure, and you might even want to write on this, so I'll say this is in left, okay? So I flip this over, move that up a little bit to not waste material, and same thing, I'm going to trace around it. See, I have it lined up vertically through the sharpening notch. This way I know I can get it nice and close to that plunge. Okay, and I'll mark this one too. So this is the inside of the right. Alright. Now I'm just going to go over to a metal cutting bandsaw. Don't use a wood cutting saw for this. If you don't have a saw, you can use an angle grinder, something that you would cut metal with. There is fiberglass in here, so definitely respirator is an absolute must when working G10. That's the one drawback to it, is this stuff is horrible to breathe in. Okay, so I'm going to cut this out on the saw, and then we'll drill it and slap it on a knife. You want to leave yourself some room. Now, like I said, this stuff grinds very easily, so when we go to finish it up and get the right shape, it's not going to take a whole lot of work. So don't be afraid to leave a little extra in case you, I don't know, you didn't clamp it right and you drill it crooked or something like that. You still have a little bit of room where you might be able to save it. Just makes life a little easier. Okay, now we're going to set it up to drill it. Alright, we're ready to drill. And as you can see, I have my work clamped, just like this. I also clamped a little paper towel to it. But we have it all clamped up inside the lines we just drew from before. So these are 1/4 inch holes that are going to be 1/4 inch pins. So I got my 1/4 inch bit ready to go over here, and we're just going to use the holes in the tang as a template. Now because of the clamps, you're going to have to get it off the ground a little bit so the clamp clears. So I'm using these 1, 2, 3 blocks, which are fantastic. They're 20 bucks. I believe USA Knife Maker has them. And if you got an extra 20 bucks, they're definitely worth it. So pick some of those up. Let's see, I'll flip it around so you can see it. G10 drills pretty easily too, so you shouldn't have any issues. Materials like carbon fiber and some of the acrylics tend to blow out on the other side. So you have to use kind of a different technique. Alright, we're all lined up. Now if there is a way that you can clamp this in, if you have a vise that can hold this whole setup together, by all means use it, because you still run the chance of spinning this around like a helicopter, and that bevel is nice and thin now, so you might get whacked. Alright, here we go. I'm holding it down with my hands as hard as I can on those 1, 2, 3 blocks to try and help prevent that helicopter. Alright. Now at this point you could put a pin in there, a 1/4 inch pin, or even you could use a 1/4 inch drill bit and just put the shank end through there just to hold your place. These clamps are pretty secure, so I'm just going to drill the other hole. Now the blade isn't taped, so be careful you don't scratch it at this point. I may have to move this over. It feels like my the hole in my... Oh no, I guess not. I didn't think the drill bit was going to line up with the hole in the 1, 2, 3 block. But looks like we did well. There we go. Alright, now I'm going to take the scale off, unclamp this whole mess, put our knife aside. Now I'm going to grab the other scale, the one that hasn't been drilled yet, and I'm going to clamp these two together. That's why we leave a little bit of extra on the edges. So this way, if you do clamp it a little off like that, well, that's a lot off, but just as an exaggeration here, if you clamp it off a little bit, you'll still be covered and you won't have to grind down the knife more. So for setup work, I have a couple of 1/4 inch pins cut out already, and I sanded them down just a bit so they fit through the holes a little better. You'll see when you put your pins in, they're going to be really tight, almost to the point where you're going to have to smack that in with a hammer. So just as a setup tool, I shaved down the pins just a hair so I don't have to smack them in and out, but it'll still hold my place. So you want a nice snug fit. Alright, we're going to clear the block. Make sure you're lined up before you start drilling. Hold that piece tight. Okay, we're through the first one. Now just to be on the safe side, I'm going to pin it. My little setup pin. See? It's still nice and snug. You want that snug fit. If you have to give it a little tap with a hammer, by all means do so. It's no big deal. There we go. That's it. You're just going to hold them together like that. That's a just in case kind of measure. Matter of fact, I need to move my clamp. I won't be able to drill it. Move my clamp over a little bit to clear the blocks. We're still all lined up nicey nice. Alright, make sure I'm clear of the hole in the 1, 2, 3 block. Okay, ready to roll. Okay. Now I'm going to take this mess apart and test fit it on the knife and see how we look. Now you don't have to make a knife sandwich, you know, like put the knife in the middle of the handles. You could just kind of put it on one side, it's no big deal. So I'll smack my other setup pin in there. Okay. And just have enough protruding on one side like that, just so you can rest the knife on it and see how it looks. Alright, looks pretty good to me. I don't see any metal from this angle, which is what you want, because everything's still lined up with our drawing. The scales are pretty much lined up. So now we're ready to shape this front end. And the way I like to do that, if you're going for a triangle like this, in order to find center, I like to mark it with a magic marker. So I would go right in the center, just like that, and put a line on both scales. So now I know when I do my triangle, I could do something like that, and like that, you see? And now I know it'll be centered. Conversely, you could just round it off. Either way, you want to make sure you finish this. If you leave this square like this, it's going to look goofy. Okay, so you could either do the triangle or just kind of round it off, just like that. I'll just draw it on there. Maybe a little less round than that. Something like that. Okay? But just make sure you finish it up here. I think knives look kind of goofy and blocky when it's just square and, well, unfinished up front. So okay, I think I'm going to go with the triangle, and I'll show you how to do that. So we're going to put our knife aside again, and you're going to smack these pins flush. Okay? Now, just like when we were profiling, we're going to set up the work rest on our grinder at 90 degrees. Okay, and like I said before, even the cheap grinders, let me zoom you out, so a little weird. There we go. Now we can talk face to face like real men, right? Okay. Even the cheap grinders have little work rests, and you can usually tilt them, or if anything, it'll be fixed at 90 degrees. So that's how we'll get this cut out initially. But that's pretty much it. I'll set up the grinder and I'll show you how it's done. Alright, we're ready to shape these scales, and what we can do is I'm going to work on the front here. I'm going to get that triangle going, and then you can take it up to the marker. Just make sure that your knife still fits in those marker lines. So I'm just going to take it back just a little bit to give us a little less work to do later. Respirator, absolute must for this one. This is a used 120 grit belt, by the way. So we got little arrow shape in the front. Good to go. To get the edges, I'm going to run the belt off the side and use the corner. Just be careful doing this. It's really easy to dig a hole that way. Okay, if you noticed, even though I got closer to the marker line, I still left a little bit of extra. Just in case, you never know. You're better off leaving too much than not leaving enough. Otherwise you're going to have to grind and change the whole profile of your knife. So leave a tiny bit extra. That's maybe a 1/16 of an inch or an 1/8 of an inch with the marker line. Alright, so now we're going to get ready to shape this front here, and we'll be ready to glue. Okay, to shape the front, I'm going to use the slack part of the belt. Every grinder has some kind of slack area. Even the 1x30s have it right above the platen. The 2x42s have it. And what this does is it'll help you round it off. And what you're going to do is get on here and watch the thin parts. So watch the points. And just do a light rocking motion. Do a little bit at a time. Like this. Okay? A little bit at a time, check it. And you're going to leave these pinned together like that. So when you go to do the other side, you could check to see that they're even. Alright, here we go. You rolling? We're rolling. Rolling. Good. Keep an eye on your edge so you don't go too far down. I like to leave about 1/8 of an inch. Okay? And it's okay if it dips down in the nose like that, or if it dips down a little bit like this, as long as it's even on the other side. Okay, you see, this side's not as big as this side, so I'm going to have to decrease my angle a little bit and bring that back. A little too much. Now I'm going to have to match up the other side. Okay, we're about even now. And what you want to do is take this up to your final finish. Let me get this respirator off. Ugh. See all the dust floating? There's dust all over the camera. This G10 is nasty stuff. Okay, so for this, I think we're going to take it up to, well, I don't know. Let's go up to an 800 grit finish. So now I'm going to sit here by hand and sand this from 120. I'm going to hit it again at 120 by hand. Go to 220, then 400, and then 800. So essentially double the grits as you're going up. You could do more than that if you want to. If you want, you could take it up to 2,000 and then buff it on a buffer, and it'll look real nice. But I'll show you a trick to get that nice shiny look without having to go on a buffer. Alright, this is why I suggest G10 as well. Very cool stuff. Alright, on to a whole bunch of hand sanding. Okay, for this I like to use, I actually decided to start at 220 since G10 works so easily. If you have any minor discrepancies in your shaping on the machine, you can clean them up now. But with G10, I like to use Windex. So just like hand sanding on the metal, except it's going to be a little faster. We'll spray down our paper and let's go to town. Now sanding by hand is going to give it a natural curve as it kind of contours with your fingers, which is what you want. Is it'll give you a nice ergonomic feel to the knife. And I'm just going to sit here and do this. Wow, this is some weird G10. I've never used this one before. Just sit here and shape and sand and sand and sand. But at 800 grit, that's what this handle scale will look like. It's actually not that bad. It's still ugly, but it's not that bad. Alright, now we're ready to glue this up and wait. Literally gonna watch glue dry.